This video is powered by the pros at Pascal Air Plumbing and Electric. Arkansas owned, Arkansas operated. GoPascal.com.
Tom, we appreciate you joining us. I know that for Arkansas fans, it was disappointing the outcome yesterday. And I think you had a disappointing first inning when Cam Brown was wild, several walks, and Arkansas just not able to convert their opportunities. I know Dave Van Horn after the game said this.
We didn't hit.
What did you think about the first inning, how Arkansas left some chances on the bases, and how that impacted the rest of the game?
Morning, guys. Always a pleasure. Yeah, it was a big deal, and we talked about it in the press box. When you got a pitcher, like TCU's been so hot, and if you hit a double or something there, I think Kendall Diggs and Caleb Calley had shots, then you're ahead 3-0, and then they feel a little bit of pressure, you know. Maybe they're swinging at more pitches that they wouldn't. But TCU was so disciplined. And honestly, if Arkansas had scored 4 in that inning, I don't know if it would have been enough. Because to me, one of the quotes of the regionals was when I asked Dave on Sunday night after they beat Santa Clara, what's your pitching plan look like for tomorrow? And it was not good was his answer. And had they won game 1 yesterday, he was honest, and he just said, I don't know what we would have done. We would have just had to piece it together, but they did not know what the plan would have been.
Yeah, and that's they didn't get to that point. Hagen Smith, though, has a pretty decent outing. They didn't want to extend him past 60 or 70 pitches. Was this just a case of the combination of the injuries that Arkansas suffered with that staff throughout the season, with the multiplying that with what TCU was hitting the baseball? Is that what we saw this regional?
We did, and honestly, I know Arkansas fans who are listening are really disappointed in, not going further than this, not making the super regionals. But for TCU, super hot team, and we all saw it. And poor Indiana State, they're a national seed, they would host, which I think would have given them a shot. But TCU will be at home for this super regional. And I know Indiana State's got some pitching, but I think they're going to get smoked. And B, the fact that Arkansas won the SEC, and Dave Van Horn said it in the piece you played before I came on, they had injuries all throughout the year, and they pieced it together. Guys who filled in did great. And I think Peyton Holt being hurt was almost like the final blow. Here's like their hottest guy, a spark plug. He was in the number 2 hole, and then he gets hurt on a swing. And so I think finally it was hard for the injured guys to come back and really get back in their grooves. Josenberger finally did. Wagner hit a home run yesterday. But they had so many disruptions in movement that to think that it could all come back together beautifully. And then you add in the arms as well, that it might have been too much to ask that everything fell back into place beautifully and all the pitching aligned. The only way they could have gotten through this regional is if Holland had pitched deep in game 1 against Santa Clara, and they don't use up Will McIntyre basically, and then Hagen Smith has a much better start against TCU, and then you have the arms to get through it. And as Dave said yesterday, they felt they were much better suited to play a super regional with their pitching than they were a regional.
You think this team ever got past or got back to that level following the collapse at Vanderbilt in the final regular season series? It seems like they never did quite get their stride back from that moment a few weeks ago.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, and I'm not going to say that, the writing was on the wall, but they had a huge lead against Vandy in game 2, 8-2 going into the 8th inning.
Right.
And if they hold that lead, then they win the SEC outright. They don't have to put a ton into the Sunday game or the Saturday game there. And I don't know what their performance is like in the SEC tournament. I'm just going to kind of throw that out because going deep in that tournament wouldn't have helped them in terms of their pitching. So, yeah, I do believe that that was a big blow, and, they never really kind of quite maximized themselves. And I mean that from the 2-out hitting, really capitalizing on everything that was given to you. They didn't quite get back to there.
And when you consider the injuries and just, having to play people out of position just to try to get through the next game, so to speak. You could almost say they maximized out the potential considering the hand they were dealt when it comes to injuries, Tom, because it seemed like every time you looked up, it was something else. And the latest one was Peyton Holt and your middle infield having to be reshuffled once again here in this regional.
I think so. I mean, and Razorback fans don't want to hear. They wanted to go to the World Series again. But I think you're right. I think they came very, very close to maximizing when you consider the guys they had that had to fill in. First, the Wagner injury. So now, Jace Borfin changes his position in the outfield. And then when Tavian Josenberger comes on, then Jace Borfin moves again. Kendall Diggs is in the outfield. Ben McLaughlin's in as a normal DH. They were actually quite productive during those games. And then the fill-in guys, Holt did spectacularly for Peyton Stovall. So I don't know. It was just a really strange year in that they played some of their best series, like the Mississippi State series and, Texas A&M, when guys were hurt and were filling in, and they were just making it work and patchwork with the pitching staff. And they got to get a little bit deeper at pitching. And, Dave Van Horn talked yesterday about the intricacies of putting a roster together in the modern times yesterday, and I'll be writing about that in the coming days.
I know this, of all the coaches there and all the coaches we've dealt with over our times in Fayetteville, Tom, no one's more candid and open generally in their postseason end-of-year wrap-up press conference than Dave Van Horn. And I always look forward to listening and watching that because he just lays it all out and lets you know exactly where kind of he's at with players and what's moving forward. I think we're going to learn a lot more in the postmortem once next few days pass and we have that opportunity.
Right. He always has a very candid end of the year press conference, which I guess will be coming in the next week or so. He'll wrap it up. But yeah, even yesterday, very blunt about things, and I think the media, we all appreciate that straightforwardness from Dave Van Horn, and it's one of the reasons why he's the most popular coach in the country, because the national writers get that too, and within the local media, is that he's just so straightforward with everything and magnanimous. I mean, he was so gracious the way he opened his press conference. I mean, he complimented the grounds crew, and I think those are choice words and well spoken. And also TCU. And by the way, Kirk Sarloos, what a great guy. I'll be rooting for TCU in the Super and in the College World Series.
Talking with Tom Murphy, Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, and Whole Hog Sports. Tom, by the way, one of our coworkers, his son is on the grounds crew, so I know he was happy to hear Dave say that after the game. We've gotten plenty of texts about Nate Thompson and Matt Hobbs, and you've seen what they've done. Nate Thompson coming in here in 2018, Matt Hobbs coming over from Wake Forest. You can't just look at this year, but how would you evaluate the hitters and pitchers for Arkansas since both those guys have been on campus?
Yeah, obviously that's an in-depth and kind of a complex question. But look, you take everything that they do, recruiting. Nate Thompson's at the head of recruiting, and game planning and all that. And Arkansas is at the very, very top when it comes to the whole deal. And I mean every aspect of the program, with the pitching lab and scouting and so on. And so I think both of them are going to wind up being really good head coaches. One thing in elimination games, the games that they've been knocked out of the postseason, they're hitting. You think about the last game against North Carolina State. You think about the Oregon State game. That was a shutout in 2018. The College World Series elimination against Ole Miss, that was a shutout. It seems like maybe toward the end, the hitting is not, being maximized. But otherwise, I mean, they did the best they could with the injuries, and they weren't near the top in batting average or all that, but they made it work. And so they did very well there. And then pitching, I mean, you've got big time arms that want to come to Fayetteville, and I don't know. You can nitpick like I did with the elimination games, but the recruiting, the player development, how they get along with the players is, I think is very strong.
It is of note that Arkansas does have the number one recruiting class baseball-wise on some services, and Nate Thompson very much and Matt Hobbs are very much a part of that, as Dave touched on in his post-game press conference. When you look at the SEC right now, Tom, you've got two SEC super regional matchups in South Carolina, in Gainesville, and Kentucky and LSU. You've got several others, including Alabama and Tennessee, that are in the super regional round as well. If you had to select one team to not just make it to Omaha, but win the whole thing based on what you saw this weekend, who do you like?
Well, I didn't see a whole lot of other baseball this weekend, but based on it, Todd Walker made a comment, I think in Hoover, that the seasons after you do great, but you don't win it all, and that's Tennessee.
Yeah.
That they're dangerous, and they do have some pitching, and they're not quite the hitting team, but I would be very wary of those guys. And LSU, I think the depth of their pitching staff might wind up being what gets them, but they can hit with anybody. And if they get, say a long outing out of Paul Skeens in game one in Omaha, and then they can bring him back and they patch it together, then LSU could be dangerous. A little surprised Vandy got eliminated so early. You think about the teams who lost: Arkansas, Vandy, Auburn.
A&M last year.
Not super shocking on Auburn, but SEC's well represented, and I would say Tennessee and LSU are the ones I would think might have the longest legs.
Tom, let's change the conversation to football. We hadn't had a chance to talk about the schedule format, not for 23, but beginning in 24. Did they kick the can down the road going with 8 games versus 9? Why the change when it seemed like the league was headed in the direction of 9 games? What happened in the 11th hour?
Right. Well, I think there was a lot of sentiment heading into Destin that might be what they do, and I think you can boil it down to some pretty essential deals. ESPN wasn't prepared. The company's having some issues, and they weren't prepared to up the ante on paying for more inventory of games if you go to 9 games. And then you've got teams like Arkansas and Kentucky, South Carolina that, don't want to have a 9th game for competitive reasons to try to get bowl eligible and stuff. I mean, that's just a reality. And so why give yourself a 9th game for not any more money and then have 8 more losses? That's the thing we heard out of Destin. They did kick it down the road a little bit. We also, I think, all understand that it's just a temporary solution to get that one season under their belts with OU and Texas coming in, and that when they can get more money for more product, then they'll probably make it a 9 game. And here, I thought it was laughable that some of the media reaction to that was like, LSU lagging, SEC lagging way behind other conferences. Yeah, really. And they're crushing people in the championship games, and they're getting 2 teams in the playoffs. And I think when the playoffs expand, you will see the SEC expand their conference games as well.
And I'll be interested to see, without divisions beginning in 24, and Sankey spoke to the fact that, the traditional rivalry games and the games that we expect to see on the schedule are going to happen. How do you maintain competitive balance that they're so worried about, and making sure schedules are even when you're going to make sure that Georgia plays Florida, and that the traditional rivalries like the Iron Bowl and the Egg Bowl get played, but also Texas and OU and Texas A&M, and all of these things still have to occur to keep everyone happy, fans, media, or television partners, I should say. How do you achieve competitive balance and still maintain the traditions that are important in this league?
Yeah, that's a tough one. And even though there was nothing official on what would have been, quote, the schedule plan with the 3 permanents, I think Nick Saban's carping about they would have had Tennessee, LSU, and Auburn. Mm-hmm. And, that's a pretty tough draw. They wanted to have a Vanderbilt or a Kentucky thrown in there, or, somebody, and they didn't. And so I think that played into this settling for an 8-game deal as well. Nick Saban was trying to cut that deal off, and so that's going to be the quandary they face. If you have a secondary rival and you want to keep it, well, if you're Alabama, then that's Auburn and then Tennessee. And that's the reality of it. And so if they make 3 permanents, those 2 are going to wind up on there, and they might have to punt their LSU series. So I think when it's all said and done, they're going to wind up at 9 games. They're going to talk through the 3 that you'd have as permanents. And honestly, I liked Arkansas, the quote talked about 3 permanents, and we'll see how it plays out. But I hope the SEC does not stick Arkansas in 2024 with another schedule like they have been. They're the team that got the most job in the COVID year by having Georgia and Florida added to their schedule. I would much rather see them get a more competitive type game instead of one of those 2.
Tom, good stuff. We'll get after it again on Thursday with you here on the Morning Rush.
I like it. See you.
BetOnline.ag is your number one source for all your basketball info, stats, news, and scores. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest player reports for this year's pro basketball playoffs. BetOnline is always your sports information headquarters this season, as we have you covered for all your sports wagering needs. Basketball, MLB, NHL hockey, right down to UFC and boxing. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way for you to get your betting info, including live betting options and your favorite casino and card games you can play right from your home. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Be sure to use our promo code BELIEVE to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's BLEAV. BLEAV. Bet online, where the game starts.